This week, police in a small market town in Norfolk were hit with rocks, bitten and spat at, while crowds tried to force their way into homes rumoured to house asylum seekers. It's the latest flashpoint in a story that's been building across Britain for more than a year. Protests, counter-protests, court battles, and a government trying to close a policy it says it can no longer afford. Here's what's actually happening and how it got to this point. To understand this week's events in Norfolk, you have to go back to July 2025 and a hotel in Epping in Essex. The Bell Hotel had been used to house asylum seekers, and tensions in the town were already simmering when an asylum seeker staying there, a 41-year-old Ethiopian man named Hadosh Kibatu, was arrested and charged with sexual assault, harassment, and inciting a child to engage in sexual activity, relating to an alleged incident involving a 14-year-old girl. Kibatu denied the charges and was held in custody on remand. Within days, more than 100 demonstrators gathered outside the Bell Hotel, some waving England flags, chanting, "Save our kids and send them home." As the evenings wore on, some of those protests turned violent, with flares and projectiles thrown at police vans. 17 people were arrested over the following fortnight, and 6 were charged with offences including violent disorder and criminal damage. Epping Forest District Council voted unanimously to formally ask the government to close the hotel altogether. From there, the story spread well beyond one town. Through August and September of 2025, similar protests broke out outside asylum hotels in towns and cities across England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, from Bristol and Liverpool to Mold and Perth. Almost everywhere these protests happened, counter-demonstrations followed too, organised by groups including Stand Up to Racism and local anti-fascist networks, who argued the protests were being driven by, or providing cover for, far-right agitation rather than genuine local concern. Police were regularly deployed simply to keep the two sides apart. By September, one large rally in London was reported to have drawn well over 100,000 people, alongside a significant police presence and a number of injured officers, making it one of the largest demonstrations linked to this issue since it began. Legal battles ran in parallel with the protests. Epping's council won a High Court ruling in August that blocked the Bell Hotel from continuing to house asylum seekers, a decision that was celebrated by protesters as a direct win, before a later Court of Appeal ruling allowed the hotel to keep accommodating asylum seekers after all. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage seized on that reversal, arguing that human rights law was effectively being used, in his words, against the people of Epping. A line that became a rallying point for critics of the government's handling of the whole situation. Underneath all of this sits a genuine and expensive policy problem the government has been trying to solve. At its peak, more than 400 hotels across the UK were being used to house asylum seekers while their claims were processed, a system ministers themselves have repeatedly described as unsustainable. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announced in March 2026 that the government intended to end the use of asylum hotels entirely by the end of this Parliament, citing costs that included housing a family of 3 in hotel accommodation for around £158,000 a year. Progress on paper has been real. Hotel use had already fallen to 197 by January 2026, and by August 2026, fewer than 160 hotels remained in use nationally, down from 213 when the current government took office in July 2024, a reduction of close to 30%. The government says closing hotels in batches, 11 in April, 20 in June, another 13 announced more recently, is expected to save taxpayers around £224 million this year alone. As of March 2026, official figures put the number of asylum seekers still in hotel accommodation at just under 21,000 people, roughly a fifth of everyone currently receiving asylum support in the UK. The trouble is that closing hotels doesn't make the underlying question disappear, it just moves it somewhere else, and that's exactly what triggered this week's unrest in Norfolk. In June 2026, the Home Office announced plans to reduce reliance on hotels by using larger sites instead, including former military bases, one of which was RAF Barnum, a a disused airfield roughly 3 miles from the town of Thetford, expected to house between 1,000 and 10,000 and 20,000. 150 people, mostly single men. Opposition to that plan built for weeks before boiling over. Between the 4th and 6th of August 2026, Thetford saw 3 consecutive nights of disorder. Crowds targeted homes that were rumoured, in some cases based on lists of addresses circulated online, to be linked to asylum accommodation, causing damage and, according to Norfolk police, subjecting officers to what they described as significant aggression, including one officer struck with a rock, one bitten and another spat at. Several people were arrested. Days later, on the 9th of August, protesters gathered directly outside the former RAF Barnum site itself, continuing the demonstrations in a more organised, less chaotic form than the disorder that had preceded it in Thetford town centre. So where does that leave things as of right now? Both sides of this story are, in a sense, telling the truth about their own experience of it. Residents in towns like Epping and Thetford have raised specific, real concerns about safety following individual criminal charges, about being given little notice or say before large accommodation sites open near them, and about the financial cost of a system even the government agrees isn't working well. At the same time, a significant number of the protests connected to this movement have involved violence, property damage, and assaults on police officers, and organised anti-racism groups have consistently shown up specifically because they believe the underlying sentiment driving parts of this movement crosses well past legitimate local concern into targeting people based on where they're from. The government, meanwhile, is caught in the middle of its own policy, trying to close an expensive and unpopular hotel system, while discovering that the alternative, larger dedicated sites like RAF Barnum can generate exactly the kind of local backlash it was hoping to avoid. What's clear is that this isn't a single event with a single explanation, whatever a breaking news headline might suggest. It's a chain reaction that started with one criminal charge in one Essex town in the summer of 2025, spread nationally through a mix of genuine local anger, organised opposition, and organised counter-opposition, and is now resurfacing more than a year later in Norfolk, driven by the exact policy that was meant to calm things down in the first place. Whether closing the remaining hotels and opening sites like RAF Barnum ends this pattern, or simply relocates it to the next town on the list, is the question nobody currently involved, government, protesters, or police, can yet answer with any real confidence.